Welcome back to hour number 2 of the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA on a Friday morning. How many of you have ever heard of the Juneteenth celebration? Well, it's now an official holiday or observance in at least 40 states, and the anniversary of it is today, the Juneteenth celebration. And what's it all about? Well, it commemorates the anniversary of the arrival of Union troops in Galveston, Texas on June 19th of 1865. And those soldiers informed residents there that the Civil War was over and that President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation had already abolished slavery 2.5 years earlier. And this was called the observance of Juneteenth. And the event's emphasis on self-improvement and advancement soon spread from Galveston, Texas, where it really got started, to be recognized in communities across the United States. It's often celebrated as a festive event with picnics and parades. There's still an emphasis on self-improvement and education that is considered an integral part of the overall experience. Well, I wanted to get some comments today from some different people on this. And one of the guys I always love to talk to, and we haven't talked to him in some time, Joe Hicks. He's a member of the Project 21 Black Leadership Network. He is the vice president of Community Advocates Incorporated, a privately funded Los Angeles-based political think tank. He's been in all kinds of other jobs over the years related to service, and we welcome Joe to the show here. Good morning, Joe. How you doing?
I'm doing really well. Good to be with you, Gary.
Always a pleasure to have you on the show. And tell me a little bit about Juneteenth, because I would say a lot of people who aren't familiar with that are thinking back a little bit. And, of course, in the times in which we live right now, it seems to take on some extra added importance.
Yeah, it's a commemoration I think has kind of gotten lost a little bit in our national memory, and I think it's one that we should.
We lose Joe? Oh, apparently we lost Joe there. We got you back? Okay, we'll give Joe a call back right there. We apparently lost him on his phone, so we'll give him a buzz back. But one of the things that Joe said, after 150 years of freedom from racial oppression, including 50 years of massive government intervention and entitlements, this anniversary of Juneteenth might best be spent in collective discussions among Black Americans about what things continue to retard full participation in the way of American life. And let's get back with Joe Hicks. Joe, sorry we lost you there for a second, but I was just reading a comment that you had said that regarding the idea after 150 years of freedom from racial oppression, including 50 years of massive government intervention and entitlements, this anniversary of Juneteenth might best be spent in collective discussions among Black Americans about what things continue to retard full participation in the American way of life. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think, dates like this, any national holiday or any smaller or less observed holiday, I think gives us an opportunity. It is an opportunity for people to, cook up some burgers and down a beer or two, which is what a lot of Americans do.
Sure.
But it also provides us an opportunity to think about the significance of these various holidays, commemoration, remembrances, and to then reflect on where we are now as a nation, collectively, as a people, as Americans. I'm one that doesn't like to segregate out Black history from other history. Hey, it's history. It's our collective history, all of us. And in this case, it certainly gives us an opportunity to have those kind of discussions. And in many ways, it's even more important inside of Black communities for those discussions to take place, because we've seen some pretty bad times here in this country in terms of these various shootings of, generally speaking, Black men.
Right.
A lot of this come by police. We've got all sorts of claims about what that means about police, and I'm one who thinks that gives us a chance to look at that. And now we've got another horrendous kind of event that took place.
South Carolina.
Recently,
right.
South Carolina, and a guy clearly with some racist kind of beliefs and feelings about Blacks, and acts that out in a horrific way. So I think that's something that also is in the mix of all these sorts of discussions in terms of where we are as a people and where are Black folks in this historical journey we're on. So I'm hoping some of that is taking place, will take place. There's a lot of myths, Gary, out there floating around about black people, about Americans, about police, about racism, and I think that's something we should all be talking about. By the way, I'm not talking about this kind of lame notion that we've heard Eric Holder talk about. Well, we must engage in a national conversation about race. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people in churches, people in their workplace, people sitting around their kitchen tables having these conversations. The kinds of things that I think do Americans the best, and I'm hoping that's going to be taking place more now.
I think you made a great statement there, Joe, and it's that history is history. I was a history teacher for about 25 years before I did this, and one of the things you teach is that history isn't necessarily all good or bad or anything like that, but history is what it is, unless you're a revisionist and you want to change it around through your eyes now on what happened earlier. But I guess my point is that, okay, we look at history. Do we learn by history? Do we become better from history? History is the mosaic of all the little pieces that come together to form the picture of who America was and is becoming. And I think, if we look at it in that way, it's a very healthy thing. If we look at it in the idea of always assigning some kind of present-day blame, or somehow we haven't changed at all, or somehow history is still the same way, without really looking at it in a good, honest, authentic way, I think we really do ourselves a disservice as a nation.
Well, we do. We don't get a redo in terms of history.
No.
And we hear a lot of that. People, wanting, not having the proper perspective on what history is. And we don't understand. We have to accept the nation. Every nation has had bad issues, bad points in its past. We have to own up to that. But that's all of what makes the nation what it is, and we have to take the good, along with the ugly.
Trying to become a more perfect union, as it were.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And as you say, learn from that, and understand what history is. But you can't go back into history and redo things. It's what we do with the nation moving forward that's important. And I don't think as obviously it's a history teacher, you get this, but that's what I think we have to sort of understand about the importance of history. Because there's a learning curve there and an acceptance of this nation. And I think on balance, we live in the most terrific nation on the face of the earth. But I think a lot of times some people would like to play the role of the victim, like to live in and wallow in those bad points in the past. But the point is, that is the past. Now is now, and I would argue that we live in a nation that has probably done the best job of trying to offer freedom and equality to its citizens than any place in the world. And I think that's kind of the starting point. And I'm certainly willing to engage people who see that history differently. I think they're wrong, but I'm willing to listen to their arguments. But I think what's important is we have to get a good solid grip on who we are as a nation, and either we kind of like ourselves as a people and we like the nation, or you kind of walk around with a sour attitude about life.
Well, you're a former executive director of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. You're a guy that's been involved in service. You're a guy that's been involved in civil rights, not just for people of color, but for all people. And you look at this and you say, okay, and I think you hit something really important in one of your comments that you said, we need to talk about what are the things that are retarding full participation in the American way of life. Not only those things that are imposed by the government, we talk about minimum wages, we talk about joblessness and poverty, we talk about, all kinds of other programs that are out there. But more importantly, are we allowing the government to tether any of us to them in a type of dependency, as opposed to cutting us free and getting us to be independent in this country and be able to make something of ourselves on our own? Are we buying into that mentality? Because it seems to me the government is doing a very, very bad job of preaching independence, as we thought that maybe they should right out of the gate.
Well, I have a very simple theory about all this that I think again, using Juneteenth or any other national holiday, the birthday of Martin Luther King or any of these kinds of holidays or commemorations of history, gives a chance to look at ourselves and again. If you look at the arc of progress, of black people in this country, and then you hear people all the time saying, "Well, we're not there yet. There's so much yet to be done," and they talk about all the things that they see as problems and issues. That racism is still, stalking black people's lives and that sort of thing. And I look at that and go, well, wait a minute. Look at what the government has attempted to try to do to alleviate those things. All the trillions of dollars over the years the government has spent on poverty reduction programs. And I just ask people a simple question. Well, how's it working out for you? Because clearly poverty is still troubling many black communities in this country. So if the government has not been effective, if those programs have not been effective, and you're still whining and complaining, then maybe you need to look in the mirror or look at the party you've been voting for, or look at the kind of beliefs that you hold about that there needs to be the big heavy hand of government intervening in those communities to make their lives better. And I argue the reverse of that we have, black communities and black people as Americans have all the liberty and freedom and ability to make of their lives whatever they want to. Let's look at the Klan. I mean, at one point, the Klan was a major force in oppressing black people as an organizational formation. The Klan is now a broken, bankrupt organization that has almost no membership. Any other, name a racist group in America, the Nazi Party. How many people in America are really members of the Nazi Party?
Right.
You could probably put them all in a single banquet hall, somewhere in America, and they would not even fill that. So then, if it's not white racists, they're individuals like this pathetic little, human piece of excrement that, committed those killings in Charleston in that church. But that's the act of a demented mind. He doesn't come from any organized, kind of structure. So let's talk about the issues that are the real issues that are facing black Americans. Poverty, yes, poverty, crime. All those kind of issues are still there. So then what needs to be done? I'm suggesting that needs to be the question that gets asked for people sitting around thinking about Juneteenth. Then those issues are still there, yes. Schools that don't function well. What needs to be done with that, since all the government intervention has not propelled that in any particularly positive direction? Then maybe other things, says Joe Hicks, maybe we need to look at other kinds of things as self-help programs, campaigns inside of those communities to begin to really seriously address those issues that have nothing to do with what the government can give us.
The other part of it too, Joe, and it's kind of interesting, we have this feeling in the country right now that we have this really bad feeling between blacks and whites and so forth, but I think it's trumped up by the media for the most part. But one of the things that happens is you get these kind of situations with this Dylan Roof, this 21-year-old I want to say person, I guess he is, but that's about the end of it, goes and shoots and kills 9 people, and some begging for their lives. But then it seems like somehow, and I don't think all people do this, but I think the media at least, or at least some people try to, maybe some of the people who would like to profit on this, then say, well, Dylan Roof, there's a little Dylan Roof in all of us. I think that's what happens a lot right now. I want to come back and get your thoughts on that, and we'll take that a little bit further. We're with Joe Hicks this morning, outstanding guest. He's a member of the Project 21 Black Leadership Network. He's a vice president of Community Advocates Incorporated, a privately funded Los Angeles-based political think tank, and he'll be right back to answer that question. Is that what happens? Is then this Dylan Roof, who shot up this church in South Carolina, is there then the subliminal kind of thought that, well, you know what? He's an example of exactly how most people think in this country. Well, most people don't think like this guy, thank God. But do they then say, well, there's a little Dylan Roof in all of us, so you ought to feel a little guilty about this guy because it's a white guy shooting 9 people who were black in a church. And the guy obviously is a sick sick person. We'll come back just after this with Joe Hicks on the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA with Joe Hicks, a member of the Project 21 Black Leadership Network, a vice president of Community Advocates Incorporated, a privately funded Los Angeles-based political think tank. Joe, I asked you that question before we went. Am I reading it incorrectly that there's a lot of people that say, well, if you've got a Michael Brown or you've got, a Trayvon Martin or you've got this kind of situation, there's a little bit of all you bad people out there in that. I mean, it's kind of what I think has if it's brought about a division, maybe that's part of it. Your thoughts?
Well, you hear an awful lot of that. In fact, I heard it just last night at a public meeting that I spoke at, and there was a lot of that kind of sentiment that, this isn't surprising. That is all too present in all too many white Americans. It's kind of indictment of white people in this country.
And President Obama has even added to that in other situations, too, by saying, it doesn't just happen at this police place. It's all over the country. So go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no. So that's kind of on the part of a lot of black activists. You get that kind of response that we're not surprised. A lot of white people maybe don't have the courage, I guess. Hard to say this guy had courage to do what this young white kid did. Let me just sidestep for a second and note the kind of comment that we got from President Obama, who doesn't seem to like the country that he's the president of very much. And he made a comment about this couldn't have happened in any other nation. And he went into this whole kind of politicization about guns.
I listened to it, yeah.
Yeah, so he immediately politicized it, but slammed America as being this kind of rogue nation where people are running around killing each other.
Not the 99.6% people who might carry guns around and not do a thing with them. But go ahead. Yeah.
Precisely, and that listen, this nation affords us a lot of freedom and sort of personal accountability for our actions. You own a weapon, you're personally accountable for those actions, but it's slanderous to then force white people to somehow own and be accountable for the actions of a demented soul. And this notion that we still have a population of white people in this nation, still the majority, by the way, of this nation, who still haven't really evolved much beyond the 1930s. And it would even be slanderous to say that in 1930, that the majority of white people in this country harbored those kind of feelings about black Americans. Yes, there was a lot of white supremacy in the thought patterns of a lot of Americans in the 1920s and 30s and perhaps even up into the 40s or so. But that's all changed. And so what was the collective response to the shooting in Charleston? Well, it was collective outrage.
That's right.
I mean, I was in...
As it should have been, by the way. Yeah, without... It's ridiculous not to have that.
Exactly, but I was in my elevator going up to my office. I'm in a big, huge skyscraper kind of building where my office is downtown. I'm and it has one of those little kind of video screens in the elevator where it has a newsreel that spins, and so they had this whole thing about Charleston. The elevator is packed. Almost everybody in the elevator was white. Except me and another woman, and people were like watching this feed about Charleston. At that point, yesterday morning, we had most of the facts: 9 dead, et cetera, man on the loose. They're looking for a young white man, and the collective response was this just kind of gasp among people. It was palpable. A woman behind me started to cry. I mean, just tears. I mean, it wasn't like he was blubbering in the elevator, but she was just shocked. I mean, it shocked her. So I guess my point, Gary, is you need to grab somebody by the scruff of the neck who makes that kind of allegation that white people in some way collectively are responsible, or that America is responsible, and that racism is still that kind of force in our society. It's outrageous and scandalous for people to make that, yet you will hear it. I've heard it. I've read it on the part of a lot of, sub-level black leadership in this country that is making right today, trying to make that kind of case. See, racism is still so strong in this country that a white man can walk in a church and just shoot black people.
But you're right. But who among us, any person of any decent character at all, which I think comprises most people in this country, didn't walk out and have the same kind of reactions that lady did or you did or anybody else did.
Of course.
And it wasn't because of race, and it wasn't because of anything. It's because we're people. It's because we're fellow citizens. It's because we're fellow travelers on the planet, if you will, that we would just revolt at anything like that. I mean, if you're not revolted at that, then maybe you ought to check yourself in the mirror and see what's going on, because you're maybe moving in the direction of this kid, and this is a sick individual. It needs to be called out for what it is, and that's it. Joe, I always enjoy talking to you. I wish we could do it for a longer time every day, but let's do it again very soon, okay?
Anytime, Gary. It's always good to be with you.
Take care. I appreciate it, my friend. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Sure thing. Right.
Joe Hicks with us here on the Gary Sutton Show, making some good sense. Juneteenth celebration. Brian, we're going to put that up on Facebook.com/910WSBA. That'll be up on Monday. I always enjoy those kind of conversations. When we come back, Chris Carosa is an MBA, certified trust and financial advisor, author of Hey, What's My Number? How to improve the odds you'll retire in comfort. Find out more at lifetimedreamguide.com if you'd like. But the question is going to be, will the auto IRA close the savings gap? What's an auto IRA, you ask? We're going to find out when we come back with Chris Carosa right here on the Gary Sutton Show on News Radio 910 WSBA. It's 1031.